Today, we're going to have a fascinating podcast discussion live from Taiwan. We have our correspondents from Taiwan on the ground dealing with the aftermath of the great Nancy Pelosi, who has taken off away from that island as quickly as she arrived. And we're excited to have with us Justin Lewis joining us from Taiwan, as well as Stephen Young, who also joins us from Taiwan. Stephen will be playing a wild card role, being both interviewed and a interviewer of Justin Lewis, who is going to give us some background onto the context of what's going on. Is CCP China going to invade Taiwan? What should America do? All of this is going to be explored today on this podcast. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome, or thanks for having me on. What a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me on as well.
I saw this comment that Stephen posted on our Instagram page for our program. Somebody said, Christianity's rules create victim mentality. And he said, no, Christianity gives awareness of the victim, and stories such as the crucifixion narrative reverse the power dynamics of might makes right. History gets told by the winners, and dead men tell no tales. By giving the victim the supreme name and position, and putting the symbols and concepts of the story in the front and center of our mindset, even in the minds of those who reject the historicity or even the moral value of the stories. They can't get the symbols themselves from the stories out of their minds. And so for someone who refuses to accept the way of forgiveness and repentance, the symbol of an innocent, forgiving victim gets twisted into the symbol of a victim mentality bent on revenge and payback. Wow, that's a powerful statement you just made, Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah, I think like the talking point, the central talking point nowadays is always the victim. Who's the victim on any given topic, like abortion or whatever the topic is. I guess now we're going to talk about Taiwan and China and Pelosi and see who's the victim there. But I think like because the story kind of put Christ as the story of the gospel kind of put Christ as the king, even though he was killed and made powerless, he got all the power. And so that symbol is kind of in our mind, and it makes people want to be the victim, even if they don't accept the way of forgiving. And so if they don't, then they'll twist it into a different kind of shape, but they'll still kind of have the idea of a victim in their mind.
So I've got a lot of different narratives around the China story. So I got some people who have lived in the what is it called? The Cultural Revolution. And they said it wasn't as bad as American propaganda, that it wasn't as bad, that actually there was a lot of Christian principles with the Cultural Revolution. And actually it was trying to teach people to be kind to their neighbor. And if you were not helping a little old lady across the street, you were considered a bad party member. Like it was all about giving of your life to someone else and loving your neighbor as yourself. And so there's a lot of Christian elements that are within that cultural ground by which the Cultural Revolution took place. That's what I've heard perspectives of people who've lived there during that time.
In China?
Yeah. And then on the other hand, then I hear from other conservatives, of course, the nationalists, the MAGA people, they're saying, CCP China is infecting Hollywood, Meta, Facebook, Google, everything. Peter Thiel has said that Google engineers could be spies for CCP China. Then there's the libertarian side, people like Ron Paul, who say, nope, all this stuff is a bunch of scapegoating energy. They're trying to yes, CCP China has a lot of problems. Yes, they're corrupt. Yes, they're authoritarian. But they are just like Russia, they're a scapegoat by which our government is whipping up our population to be afraid of a foreign boogeyman who's around underneath every rock, and infecting our society. And then others, people like Blake Masters, who's running for U.S. Senate, and I know him. He's the GOP nominee for U.S. Senate in Arizona, and he says, the CCP connected corporations and individuals should not be able to buy up all the farmland and property that they're buying in America right now. And then you have people like Justin who says, well, Taiwan is a victim here of CCP China. And then other people tell me, wait a second, who is it? Oh yeah, somebody else was telling me, but actually, it's not actually that way, that we should stick our nose out of that business. We shouldn't be involved. And everything Nancy Pelosi is doing now is just designed to use the Taiwanese as a foil, just like the Ukrainians, to do a proxy war for elite interests. So how do we sort all of this narratives out? Justin, go first, please.
Well, yeah. I think, first of all, I kind of want to mention about Hollywood being infected by the CCP. In my opinion, Hollywood is already infected by itself. So, I guess if China's in on that too, I mean, it is kind of annoying to see some of these shows and movies censor themselves. But I think in terms of Taiwan being a victim, I think that all people should be able to determine their own destiny. And so that's really the main reason that I stand with Taiwan on that issue. I think that if Taiwan wants to be a part of China, great, let them. If they want to be their own thing, cool. But I think China is using Taiwan as a piece to kind of manipulate their own people into submission. So anytime certain outside enemies to kind of be the greater enemy of the state. So I think that's part of the dynamic that's playing out there. And so anytime you have I guess internal disruptions and maybe civil unrest at home, then you're going to need to look for an outside conflict. So I think that's really what's happening. And even up to a few years ago, you've got the Hong Kong, so many people trying to basically declare independence in Hong Kong. And during the time of the COVID outbreak, they were having massive protests in the Wuhan area, matter of fact. So I think that that's probably maybe a weakness that China is kind of doing that to kind of cover up for. But yeah, I think that Americans who are really engaging in this debate of should we protect Taiwan or should we not, I really don't view Taiwan as the primary threat in all of this. I think that if you consider it from China's perspective, they're much more patient. They view their empire as this very, it's a really, really long game for them. So for them to invade when it's not the most opportune time, it doesn't really make much sense, I think. They might put a blockade around Taiwan to make life miserable for Taiwanese. And I think that America is actually more at a threat right now than Taiwan in terms of being attacked militarily.
By China?
Yeah, which might sound a little extreme, but I think that that seems to be a bigger target.
I was just in Kenting this last weekend, and
That's in
there's
Taiwan.
the southernmost point, and it looked on the map. There's I think 6 spots that are surrounding Taiwan, and it's one of the closer spots. And I was like, wow, I bet like I could ride a boat there in 30 minutes or an hour to the spot where they are like having their, I don't know what exactly is out there in that red area marked on the map that I've seen pictures of, but I was in Kenting about a month or several months ago, and I talked to 2 people the same weekend, and both of them said that Kenting was the most dangerous or or safest place to be in the world. One of them said if China arrived, he would run right to the nuclear power station and just hide there cross the barricade and just hide right there. And because they would never be dumb enough to like drop a bomb or something on the nuclear power plant. And then the other guy was he flew out like the very next day. He left Taiwan because he thought that was like we're in the most dangerous place in the world. So I've kind of heard different perspectives. I kind of agree about the long-term game. I think that my dad had a college roommate from China who he contacted him again, and I guess he's very high up in the CCP right now. I don't think they're like, but my dad remembered that roommate telling him just a little bit, like they had plans for over the next 50, 100 years to kind of slowly take over different things. And it was like a really long-term game. And I guess he's like, maybe someone high up in there. I kind of think maybe the reason Taiwan is a threat is because the people are very successful and they're the same ethnicity as China, but they're not controlled by the government is run in a very different, much more free way. And so maybe that's an identity challenge or an identity threat to the Chinese, maybe, that the same ethnic people can live on a different island and be very, very successful and not be run by their version of government. And the other thing I was wanting to say is the CCP has never owned the island of Taiwan. There was a war during the time that the army that lost in mainland China fled to Taiwan. That army used to run China, but the CCP government never controlled the Taiwanese island at any point in history. So it's for many people, it's kind of it's a very sensitive topic, and most Taiwanese people I talk to about politics don't really like to talk about it because it's a touchy, sensitive subject that doesn't bring up happy thoughts. So it's nicer to talk about other things.
Yeah, it's amazing how few people do want to talk about it, and yet on the news almost every night you can look at some kind of a piece where, like, you know, they're definitely wanting people here in Taiwan to be slightly afraid of China, or to know that, you know, the U.S. is on our side. Hey, look, there's a U.S. aircraft carrier is coming by our strait again. You know, they always put that kind of stuff on the news. They always want to make every little thing they do, hey, we practiced with our artillery today. Like, so it's like they want people here to be aware of it, but people on the street don't want to talk about it. And I've tried to think of an analogy that would kind of be fitting to help people have a perspective of maybe why, like, what this issue would be like if it was America. And some people suggest Hawaii as sort of like a comparable issue. I mean, I don't think that one's really as good because I mean, for many reasons, it's kind of pretty far away, but like Taiwan is like 100 and I think it's like 100 miles or 100 or 200 miles. It depends on which island chain. Like Taiwan has other islands. And it was kind of funny. I know some people who actually went to Liuqiu to see like China shooting its ballistic missiles over Taiwan when that happened a few weeks ago.
They went to go see that?
Yeah, it was like a tourist activity. Like they're not even fazed by it. Like there's missiles flying over the country. They're just
how did they know it? So how did they know they were going to be doing that?
Well, because China announced it and they were shooting from certain places, and so they figured, hey, because so imagine Taiwan. I'm sure a lot of you have already seen this map if you're interested in this topic. There were basically 7 no-fly zones, no voting zones around Taiwan, basically a checkerboard where it really made it difficult for planes to fly in and out of Taiwan. They had to reroute. A lot of the flights had to like completely reroute to like fly straight north to through Japan and avoid these places that had been declared no-fly zones, which were much closer into Taiwan than typically when you hear the planes are flying over the corner edge of the I guess the normal line of the median line. But anyway, yeah, they just figured, hey, let's just give this a try because it doesn't cost that much to get a ferry to go over there, and it's yeah, you can also swim with the sea turtles at the same time. I actually just went. I was over there just before they did those.
I went like 3 weeks ago. I've gone there
Okay.
like more than 20 times. I love Xiaoliuqiu.
Yeah,
The other one, Penghu seemed like there were some boats close to there as well. There's a lot of little islands: Jinmen, Penghu, Green Island, Orchid Island.
We have, as of right now,
like,
we have 28.
Yeah,
we have 28.
Taiwan.
We have 28 podcast audio listeners from China. Uh-oh.
Right now.
Yeah.
Ni
As I
hao.
just looked it up. Hello.
Yeah, so basically Taiwan is about the same distance, relatively speaking, to China as Cuba would be to the US. So if you want to try to imagine like how China might feel, maybe like think of if Cuba had been, imagine the Civil War happened later in the US, right? And the South, they fled to Cuba and they fully took it over. They fully colonized it. I mean, yeah, there were still some natives there, but they got displaced because there still is a pretty large native population on Taiwan, but they've been displaced for the most part. And you've got settlers that came at different points. So, you just try to imagine that. Like you've got some of the Spanish people, some of the indigenous people, but mostly gringos had settled, the southern gringos. But this happened, in the 1950s instead of the 1860s where they lost. And, because of the fact that, and I also imagine Cuba is a much more mountainous place. And you had a country like, I don't know, Russia, who is willing to run aircraft carriers in between that island to say, hey, look, we're not going to let you take this place over. And so like you have basically, yeah, you've got a similar culture, and you've got very, very close, but it's very difficult to attack Taiwan because they have their own production lines of medium range ballistic missiles that are hypersonic, and they say they can probably hit a lot of the tier 1 cities. So I don't think that Taiwan or China wants it to go that far. I feel like they view them kind of more as relatives than as like these foreign adversaries. Like a lot of people would look at cultures that they they can't.
So China would do you think China, CCP China, the government hates Japan more than Taiwan as a
probably
check? Okay.
Well, and actually, when the war was going on in China, there was a civil war that was ongoing between the PCR and the ROC, which is the modern day government of Taiwan. And that war was kind of ongoing at the same time as Japan had basically occupied many, like the northern part of China. And so they kind of joined forces, I think, at certain points to fight off Japan, but then eventually, and then the US kind of stepped in to help out to free China. But then the war restarted after World War II ended. And yeah, so at the time where World War II ended, officially, the way the treaties were drawn up for Taiwan was, the government that was being acknowledged in the UN at the time, right after the end of the war, was the ROC. The PCR was kind of, they were still fighting the civil war on certain edges of of China. But it was determined that Taiwan would be taken away from Japan because it had been a territory, I think, up until like from 1890 something, 1897 up until 1946 was the official changeover. So part of the treaty with Japan was, hey, you got to give Taiwan back to the ROC. And then so when the PCR eventually, the communists eventually took over, that was a very good safe haven for that government to maintain itself. So it is correct to say that the PCR has never owned this area, but at various points, Chinese dynasties have colonized it. So it's interesting that whole debate on does China really have a claim on it or not. I don't really know.
So the
but
Chinese,
I do,
the Chinese they have colonized Taiwan in the past.
the Chinese have. There's been a few dynasties.
They're making an
and
argument kind of similar to like the Israeli government, right? That we've been here before, so this is our rightful place. We can come back.
Well, yeah, I guess
Is
it
that
would
what
be
CCP China's saying? Kind of like we've been here before, yeah, maybe a while back, but this is ours.
Well, I guess it would kind of be like if so if you want to take like the Anglo-American Empire, let's say that England or England had owned Cuba at one point, but then they got kicked off, and the Spanish were there, and then the Dutch were there, and then the indigenous revolution of Cuban people, and then eventually the Southerners fled over there after the Civil War. It would be kind of like that, I think. It's kind of an abstract analogy in some ways, but basically, I think. Oh, go ahead.
England owned Cuba, and then the
so it would be like a
Southerners.
It would be kind of a similar dynasty, but it wasn't the same PCR government. It was a different variation of the Chinese people.
And PCR is CCP now. Is that what it is?
Yeah, the PCR, People's Republic of China.
I'm not a history buff, so I probably used the wrong term. I think you're right on. I just threw out CCP, never owned them, but I think it's a more new political group. So well, I'm not like brushed up on the names of the parties.
They're kind of one and the same. So China has one party, the CCP, and they do have elections, but the CCP, I think, is the only party that's allowed to run in that. Which, whatever. But yeah, the CCP.
Who are they voting against? Who's there? So what's an election if there's only one team to vote for? It just says write in who you want if you dare. That's the other option.
Right.
Is that what it say?
Yeah. Yeah. And for the people that are listening from China, like I have a question. Like if you are pro CCP, for me, okay, so you have been pledging with Hong Kong to give them the right to basically govern themselves. But then as soon as you took them over, like half of the not half, but many of the governors, the people in parliament got kicked out and just replaced. So that doesn't really seem very much like self-rule. And as I've said before, I think Taiwan, they should have the right to make that choice for themselves. And I think that from just talking to people around here, it doesn't seem, I haven't met very many people who are pro CCP. I actually met somebody who is an American citizen who went back. They were pro CCP, but I don't think they were really close enough to the issue. Their family just happened to kind of support that. But most of the people who live here don't want the issue to even exist. They just want Taiwan to be left alone. So it's a kind of a frustrating situation. I don't think that China would have any benefit if they came over here with a land invasion and just started bombing, Taiwan to oblivion. I don't think that would really benefit them. First of all, you've got the semiconductor industry over here, but then you're gonna upset these people who are you're claiming are your own kindred, and it's gonna be very difficult to pull that back. Whereas you could just spend the next 10 years taking over the Taiwanese media, which seems like that's already happening. It seems like the Taiwan CDC is probably infiltrated, it looks like, because they're making it.
For our audience, it's not like Ukraine where you have the eastern side having an ethnic and cultural affinity to Russia, and then the western having some, roots elsewhere in other European cultures. With Taiwan, they're all homogeneously the same cultural, ethnic origin as the CCP mainland China. Is that right?
I wouldn't really say that. You've got people that are called the Hakka people who are basically from like kind of a more southern region of China, and you've got people who have immigrated over from, like, I guess they're the Han people. You've got the indigenous people, and
I guess what I'm saying is there a large faction of what is called Taiwan that would similarly be very hostile to any kind of cultural togetherness with the mainland Chinese who might want to be coming over there to take over. You see what I mean? The Ukraine in the Ukraine, the eastern side has kind of largely been more sympathetic to Russia coming in, and then the Western side is more vicious and violent and, going against Russia's coming in. Is there a similar dynamic that is available in Taiwan? You know what I mean?
I think in
Would,
oh, go ahead.
would you say the blue and green party would be like that? But it's not like a land area.
They're all
but
mixed together.
Yeah, kind of. I think. I think the blue. I don't follow politics and I don't hear it, and so I get them mixed up. I think the Tsai Ing-wen, which one is she? Is she?
She's green.
She's green.
What's blue and green?
So the blue.
Green, oh, you can explain it better than I can, I think.
Yeah. So the blue party is I guess more in favor of reunification. But they kind of want a really slow, gradual, and they're very vague about it. So they won't directly come out and say that because it'd be kind of like political suicide. But then the Green Party is staunchly opposed to it. They just say, and they're the ones that are, I guess, pushing more for independence, if that is a real thing, because they, like the president Tsai Ing-wen said, we actually are an independent country. We're the ROC. We've never ceased to be these ROC since we're here, and because the ROC had territorial jurisdiction over this island, it wasn't like they were fleeing to a place that wasn't theirs, that was China's. Like, they were fleeing to a place that was within their own territory still. Just, I guess, if you take the Civil War, U.S. Civil War analogy, it would be like if the South had owned Cuba, which I think at various points the U.S. did have Cuba as a territory, so it's not that far off. But yeah, I think the younger generation especially is very opposed to reunification with China. But with Ukraine, you do have less of a cultural problem here in Taiwan than there would be, I shouldn't say less of one, but so for instance, in Ukraine, the government there kind of started to make it to where they were discouraging Russian from being taught in schools and from being used in signage and things like that. So there were more discriminatory actions that were taking place, which wouldn't really come into play here. Like they could if the China took over Taiwan, the language that's being commonly spoken is the same language. There's a little bit of an accent different, kind of like, if you were to go up to New York, they kind of talk funny, and they use simplified Chinese, which is a little different, but it's not like they're pretty much still mutually intelligible for the most part. People in China have a harder time reading traditional, but people who can read traditional can usually go back and forth without a problem. So you wouldn't have that language problem, but I think, I think most Taiwanese, they don't want to fight. I don't know how they would do in a war if they would, they were very afraid of COVID, and everybody to this day is still like, we're supposed to be wearing masks outside and people are just going along with it. So they're very afraid. They're very submissive to the state. So I kind of wonder if Taiwan has the heart to really fight. If the bombs really start flying, is Taiwan really going to fight? I know I've met a lot of soldiers and they're definitely willing to defend the country, but I don't know if they have the will to resist a long-term violent conflict like that. When the advantages of joining with China, there are some advantages. They would become they would merge with one of the largest economies in the world. It's kind of interesting that there's a lot of trade that happens between China and Taiwan. And so you wonder if there's some backdoor deals that have already been made between the politicians and the Chinese world, like deep state or whatever there is down here. I don't know if there is one, but I think there, maybe there's been deals that have made of, hey, let's just use this for our own political advantage and we'll merge at some point. But, I really think the game is America. I mean, they're destabilizing the culture over there. I mean, I just read in the news, okay, the military, hold on, this is just too unbelievable. I have to pull this up. U.S. Air Force Base hosts kid-friendly drag show. This is a U.S. Air Force base. It's like the U.S. is under cultural attack. And I'm not making that statement to be against LGBT, but when you're sexualizing the youth, I mean, would you be in favor of, having like scantily clad women, dancing around kids. Like I feel the US is so blatantly under cultural attack right now. And this Taiwan piece is kind of a distraction. And I think that if anything, the US should be concerned that China isn't actually more interested in subverting our government. I mean, look at who's in office. The guy is barely able to, put a sentence together. It seems like
And
there's a very strong chance that
wasn't
we've
he
already been taken
connected
over.
to wasn't he connected to Hunter Biden was connected to the top spy chief of China? What was all that about?
Exactly. Like Biden shouldn't even have been able to run. And I'm not really a big Trump supporter because he pushed the whole what's it called, warp speed thing, the untested medical procedures on people. So I feel his base should basically kind of abandon him and look for a different person at this point. He's not the I guess the savior that they want him to be. So I'm not pro Trump, but I just feel like look at this guy. Look at Biden. It's like he doesn't seem like he's all there. Anybody who's honestly, objectively looking, who's dealt with dementia patients. So who's running the show in the US? People who talk about unfair elections, like why is that stuff not allowed to be talked about? Why do people get banned? Why are you not allowed to actually go and audit elections? And Taiwan is actually a great example. If you want to talk about solutions, Taiwan has a system to where they hold up all the ballots on film. The name and all that stuff is on the other side, so it is still a private ballot, but they hold them all up and they live stream it. So every vote, you could actually, if you wanted to audit a certain precinct, you could just say, okay, roll the tape back. And they also allow people to come in with their own cameras to have backup evidence to make sure it correlates. So Taiwan probably has the most secure elections in the world right now, or because of that. So what's the big deal? So for me, as an American who's living over here, just looking at all the stuff that's going on, looking at how the cities are just in decay and how they're pushing a lot of these agendas on people, just getting people to fight each other. Who's behind that? I think it could be China. It could be, the people who run China, with the globalists that set China up for success as the model.
So you kind of agree with the populists and the nationalists and the MAGA people who say that a lot of the cultural revolution America is undergoing is funded or is started by CCP?
Well, I think the CCP is a phenomenon where the UN and I guess like that China was a product of globalists a long time ago, setting China up to see, okay, and in my opinion, it looks like it was an experiment. How can we control a very large population with a technocratic system? And I think China showed that it can be done. And so now that they've done the test, why not roll it out everywhere?
But hasn't China been opposed to globalists like George Soros and stuff being in? They've got a nationalist streak to them. So how does that fit? How can we say this is what I don't understand? Like I hear some people say, "Oh yeah, they're part of the globalist thing," and then I hear them they hate George Soros and they don't want him involved in their country's stuff. And then I don't really know what China's position is on Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum Great Reset folks. What are their official positions on that? If they've made any statements, I don't know. I just don't follow China at all. That's why I'm talking to you guys.
I don't really know about these individuals that much. I don't research these like really token globalist individuals, but I do know that China took a very active role in the World Health Organization. It's not as much as the U.S., by the way, but they definitely want to have a presence in the global sphere. They're creating the Belt and Road Initiative so they can have more of an influence in many of these countries. They're using kind of some shady tactics to do that, but the US has done that before. But I mean, I feel like they might be against globalism when it comes to globalism influencing their own culture, but in terms of being able to use that as a to their own advantage, I don't know. I don't think they're too opposed to that.
I don't think they're opposed to controlling other countries, like or like benefiting from labor and property and stuff in other countries. My friends were living in Ecuador and they said that a lot of people were very upset about the deal over some dam that was made by Chinese in Ecuador, and they had promised that it would work and add a lot of power to their energy grid, power grid. But the dam didn't actually work as well as promised.
Oh man.
And they thought it would bring in a lot of work for the Ecuadorians, but actually they shipped in or brought in lots and lots of Chinese workers, and the only people working at that company were Chinese people. And then now that the dam is completed, Ecuador owes China a lot, and I think they're doing this kind of thing, building highways and infrastructure in a lot of countries and setting up like long-term deals with them. I think they're doing a lot of that in Africa, and I don't know how much land they're buying up or setting up deals like that. But it was really strange flying on a plane a few years ago, just before COVID, back to the States, and I watched it was a Chinese Xiamen Airlines plane, and they had a movie about war in Africa or something, where Chinese soldiers, I don't know if it's the PLA, People's Liberation Army, or some other Peace Corps group, some kind of peacemaking, I don't know, soldier group that goes to another country and tries to end some kind of thing. They were the whole movie seemed to be kind of like Captain America, like, but for China, Captain China. Like, these poor kids are being abused by raiders and invaders, and they're being turned into like child warriors or whatever, or raped and stuff, and then the Chinese army comes in and saves the day, and something like, I didn't really understand it, and I didn't watch the whole thing. I just watched a little bit of it and thought it was very interesting on their Chinese airline flight.
That reminds me of a flight I took one time to Japan, and the whole airplane besides me and a couple people were Japanese people. And that was back when they had, I don't know if they still do this, but in this particular big plane, they had the big movie theater style one screen for everybody to watch the same thing. And they put on Big Mama's House 2. And I just remember it was just a very quiet plane ride as everybody from Japan was watching Big Mama's House 2. And there was no laughter. There was no applause. It was just a silent film of Big Mama's House 2 playing. And as we flew over Mount McKinley, it was very strange. Just silent. You know, everybody just sitting in silence. And no one chuckled. No one laughed. Even when Martin Lawrence did some of his best routines, it was just silent as they watched very intently at Big Mama's House 2 as they arrived back to Japan and Tokyo. So that was interesting.
Wow.
Interesting.
It's a much more polite and subdued culture, for sure.
Yeah, I think people are pretty polite. I think
are Taiwanese in a similar vein like that, or different?
Definitely, very much. I think it depends on the part of Taiwan you're at. Like in the East Coast, it's not quite as much that way.
A little more rowdy.
A little more rowdy, and that's in part because of the natives. Like, I remember one time I sat down at a restaurant kind of late at night doing some web work, and it was like probably at 10 p.m. and some indigenous folks were having a wedding, and they were like, you can't just sit there, like, and they like shoved a drink in my hand, and the next thing I knew, I was like doing some weird dance with like my hand was like under my knee, and they were grabbing, and you were basically hopping on one foot while doing the snake dance. It was bizarre, but they're just really like friendly people. They kind of reminded me of, I don't know, like the kind of energy that I felt when I was in Costa Rica, to be honest, or Belize. Or,
the Taiwanese Aboriginals are so much fun, and they're so different. I feel like their vibe is very similar to Latinos, kind of. But actually, the Maori, I think the Maori and the maybe Hawaiian Islands and a lot of the Polynesian Islands were settled by people who were originally ethnically from the island of Taiwan, and they spread out all over.
Now, are they
out of
treated in the
it.
same way? There's a permanent outcast group in Japan. Are they treated in the same way in Taiwan like
No,
that? No.
no, they have benefit. Like I don't know if it's I don't know the exact amount of extra points I think they get in their test scores, and I don't know if I think there's a lot more scholarships and stuff available to them if they're Aboriginal.
Yeah, and their cultures are celebrated. Anytime there's a
Yeah.
major event here, anytime there's some sort of a national event, like they've got this these boat races, which are really fun to watch. These like long boat races, and you know, like the indigenous peoples are celebrated. They've got song and dance and art every single year that I've gone. And yeah, so I think they're trying to do what they can to right those wrongs. But I mean, honestly, a lot of the destruction that was done to the native peoples here happened probably during the Japanese rule. From what I've heard, I talked to a few people from one of the tribes, from the Turako people, in the eastern part of Taiwan, and a lot of them, like they fought the Japanese with the machine guns, and they were like using spears and, you know, bow and arrow, and you know, so you know, I think that one of the reasons that Taiwan is so subdued is because they've been subjugated to so many different empires. You know, you've had the Spanish took over the north part of the country for quite a while. The Dutch took over a large chunk of the south. And then you've got the Japanese that ruled for, you know, decades and decades and decades. And so Taiwan has kind of been used as like a chess piece in like the geopolitics of East Asia for quite a while. And it's sad to see that. So I've never been to Japan. I've heard it's actually more subdued in Japan. So I think maybe being oppressed by the Japanese people, I don't know. I can imagine that. And then honestly, the ROC was a kind of a dictatorship. So up until I guess the 80s, Taiwan was ruled with an iron fist as well. Even
Was
by
it fascist,
its own
like
ROC.
a big business, big government kind of thing?
It was. I think it was more like there was only one party that was allowed to run, kind of like it is in China right now, from my understanding. Or that maybe that's not true, but it was pretty much a unipolar political system.
Wasn't Chiang Kai-shek, was he considered kind of corporatist, fascist or something? Or democracy? I don't know anything about it.
That's not. I don't really know too much about Chiang Kai-shek either.
Who is he? Did I say his name right?
Yeah. I just don't know if he was a corporatist or not. I think that looking at the pace of the development in Taiwan versus China, probably he was a corporatist. You know, Taiwan it's interesting how many
Is Taiwan's
industries.
economy very much like South Korea or Japan? What's the
Yes,
comparable?
actually, the GDP in Taiwan is actually higher than it is in Japan. Last I checked, just a little bit above.
Taiwan's wealthier than Japan?
Not, yeah, I guess not per capita average, but if you look at this, just the GDP average, it is. Wait, I don't know if that made sense. So there's more of a wealth gap here in Taiwan than there is in Japan, but the overall, I guess GDP would be higher here. Yeah, actually, the GDP per capita is higher here, but like there's more of a disparity in Japan, is what I was trying to say. Yeah. Which Japan is really good about that. I think there's only a 1 to 8 pay gap from like a common worker to like a corporate executive, which is pretty cool. Because like in the US, it's like 1 to 75. Like the executives are making just tons and tons more than the average employee. I think it actually is 125 to 1. It's insane in the US. Taiwan isn't quite that bad. It's like in the middle.
I've met some very, very wealthy people here, like big company owners and stuff, but so probably it would be like more like 70 to 1 for them, but
yeah,
but probably most people it's a lot less.
What's the population of Taiwan?
About 23.5 million.
So like Florida, like the state of Florida, kind of.
I guess similar, a little more. I think right?
It's actually around the size. The land size is just a little bit smaller than Costa Rica's land size.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is compared to Florida, and I don't know the population.
It's about half the size of Florida, I think, about, because Florida's got that huge panhandle and stuff. But yeah, like so Taiwan, for a long time, like you remember this? You guys probably all remember this. Who like go back to like the 90s at least, like when the Happy Meal toys all like changed from being like made in Japan to made in Taiwan and then made in China. So
Huh.
it kind of like tracks the economic growth to where these countries were producing like low grade stuff and they became more high tech and specialized. So it kind of went Japan and Korea, that happened first, and then Taiwan and then China. Although in different regions of China it was a little different, like Hong Kong and in Shanghai. But yeah, so Taiwan is definitely not a backwoods place in Asia. It's very advanced, for the most part. It's mostly mountainous too. So getting back to the war issue, it would be a nightmare to try to invade Taiwan because like 2/3 of the country is just rugged mountains. That's they could have all kinds of missile silos and just deep underground tunnel networks.
There are tunnel networks.
Yeah,
there's
like a lot of them.
There's secret maps that you can find like in old archives that you can go urbexing, like urban exploring. And there's one that a friend invited me to that I guess is just like out in the wild somewhere. And it's got like 60 entrances. I don't know how many have collapsed. And he just wants to go see some bats and see if he wants to get one of those gold detectors and see if we can find any treasure in there.
Let me know. I'd like to go on that trip. That sounds pretty fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So
I think it's near Pingdong or Kaohsiung.
So Stephen, you said that it's like paradise living in Taiwan. You love it, huh?
I love it here. Yeah, it's great here. The weather's great. I don't really like the rain up in Taipei. I don't know how it is right now. I know there's a few months in the year that there's really nice sunny weather up in Taipei, but down south it's like really sunny and warm most of the year. Where I live, there's a lot of beaches, and I like skimboarding, so I'm like 20 minutes away from 2 different beaches. And if I drive a little bit further, I can easily get to a lot more of them. And it's so easy to travel here. It's so safe. There's like very little crime and very little theft. Like you never hear about stuff being stolen hardly. And like I've forgotten my keys on my scooter many times and came back and no problem, or dropped my wallet somewhere and someone will run over and bring it back to me. So it's like a great experience.
Is it because they think that you're an outsider, or do they do that for insiders too?
Insiders too. Maybe a little bit more for white Westerners.
Is there any racism issues like in Japan? If you live there and you're mixed race, sometimes you can have problems with parades and stuff, being invited to the parade.
Well, I think Southeast Asians are looked down on kind of, since they're the menial. They come and do menial labor here, so I think they're looked down on.
Yeah, like
and
a
Europeans and Americans are kind of looked up to, sort of.
Yeah, it's very much the lighter your skin, the more preference you get, unfortunately.
Do they wear a lot of umbrellas to protect their skin from the sun and stuff, like you see in Japan and stuff?
Well, they'll on the scooters, they have a lot of the scooters will have handles, little gloves attached permanently to the handles. And you can slide your hand into the glove and grab the handle to drive. And that's like to protect it probably has 2 purposes. One is for the sun, and then the other is for the cold in the winter. Maybe it's cold and rainy and then they don't have to wear gloves, but I think it's mostly for the sun. And some people wear like sleeves in the hat and face cover when they're in the sun all the time.
It's bizarre to see people hiking big mountains, and like sometimes you'll see like women carrying umbrellas up to the top of the hike. It's like, you just hiked 1,000 kilometers, like, not 1,000 kilometers. You hiked like 1,000 meters up this mountain, and you're having an umbrella. I think that in terms of the racism issue, it's not very out in the open. Like, you saw some things happen where people were getting kicked out of apartments in China because they were, I don't know. At least that's what we were seeing in American media. If you're watching this from China, we don't really know, but it looked like things were happening against people of African descent. I don't see any of that out in the open here, where there's, as a foreigner, it doesn't seem like that. And in fact, during Ramadan festival, they're so tolerant of people from Southeast Asia, who are a large percent of them are Muslim. You'll see like people having picnics in like the main station, like just like families will be camped out. People are walking by during their commute, and you'll just have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Indonesian and Malaysian people that are just sitting there doing their Ramadan feast and in broad daylight. And I've never once seen somebody like, give them a dirty look or say, hey, get out of here. Like, what are you doing? This is our country.
Yeah, that's
you don't
true.
have that. So in the US, you probably would have a little bit of that. Like you'd have some people that weren't too happy about that. So I think they're very tolerant, but you do have some under the surface things that it's hard to measure.
Like
as a
like exploitative businesses that like maybe take their passports away, or say, we're going to protect your passport for you, and maybe lock the door at night in their dorm room, or like limit how much they can go out or whatever, and they have to like be back at a certain time, or they get their pay docked. I don't know. It seems like they have, some of them have like conditions that are.
Are they
really
interested? Are they really getting interested in the woke stuff, like transgenderism for children and critical theory and third wave feminism and Me Too?
I think they're open to they're very tolerant, so they're open to people expressing themselves. Probably if it's for children, I don't think that's really tolerated. But like maybe more in big cities like Taipei, I think someone can have their like I'm not sure. Maybe you give an opinion. I think there's like a very big mix of conservative and liberal, and both are pretty tolerant of each other. But
Is there white people like you trying to do drag queen story times at Taipei Library?
I don't think it's so much for children though. It's more like they're very tolerant. They're one of the first countries in Asia that legalized gay marriage, and there's a lot of like gay bars around the country, and it's like very free for gay people, and so a lot of foreigners come here because they feel very free to.
Do they have gender wars like in Sweden? You're not allowed to open the door for a lady.
No, I haven't encountered that. I think girls act pretty feminine, and guys act kind of very masculine, I guess.
Except for when it comes to putting on a mask in the middle of the sunlight, right?
Maybe docile, a little bit. Yeah, like they'll. Yeah, they still have that mask rule.
What's up with the mask mandate? Let's talk about that. I thought they're a free country. I didn't know they're CCP.
Yeah, well, they used to have police at the beach, just whistling at people if they don't have a mask, even in the water.
While they're swimming. My goodness, how can you swim?
Even while they're swimming. Not anymore. Like there's some rules now, like if you're out in the mountains, or if you're doing exercise, or if you're at the beach or outdoors, you don't need to wear a mask.
You guys got to wear a mask all day, every day still?
Here's the thing.
I am not happy with this information.
They say if you're exercising, you don't have to wear one. So I consider walking.
You guys should make a t-shirt that says, I flew all the way to Taiwan and all I got was this lousy mask.
Look, that's one of the things about Taiwan it's really creepy. They're such a nanny state. And before I was kind of enamored with Taiwan because I got here right after the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. And basically, as soon as it hit, everybody's working together. Their factories are starting to produce their own domestic masks, and everybody's just trying to make sure this thing doesn't happen. That's when we thought 10% of the world was going to die. But then, long after, on record, more Taiwanese are dying from the vaccine than from the so-called vaccine. Pardon me. Than COVID. They're still doing it. They're still pushing it. So it's like, okay, guys, you need to be more logical here. You need to like use common sense and not be afraid to stand up. Otherwise, you're going to end up just getting steamrolled by whatever, but they're so wanting to be recognized by the UN globalist system, and it's like, no, guys, you need to start really taking a step back and looking at what's going on.
Yeah,
Why are you
I've noticed
wearing this
like
mask? Like, it's
as
not
long as
helping.
you have it in your pocket, and if a policeman comes up to you and says like, "Why don't you have your mask on?" You're like, "Oh, I was just doing exercise, or it's kind of hard to breathe," and they're like, "Just put it on, okay." And you drive away. You can take it off again later.
I'm
They-
glad I live in
like,
the free state of Florida. Okay. All right.
Well, I've never been confronted by anybody. I think I don't know if it's down that like in the south, but of Taiwan, but up here in the north part, and I just kind of wear this little very thin one layer of cotton, mask over me. But it's,
You guys are pretty. You guys are pretty thin. If you're a bigger guy, it's very vicious to wear a mask in blazing sun and stuff. So
Yeah,
goodness,
I have
imagine.
I have a thing you can put like under the mask to like hold the mask away from your face. I was gonna, but and it makes it a lot easier to breathe. But I think like most people are really tired of it now. And
What would
It
they
makes more
say if
sense,
you
too.
walked out with a Darth Vader respirator? Would they accept that as a mask, or would they tell you to take it off?
no, I just think people are too docile to even approach to
I
say
don't
anything.
I don't even think they would process. They would probably just think you were coming back from a party or something, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, people like, there's this guy that walks around with
I go without my mask all the time. Either wear it under my chin if it's like a crowded area, and if anyone says anything, I can just put it on and like go away from them, and they hopefully don't bother me. Or just wear it on my arm, and then they're like, "Where's your mask?" I'm like, "Here," and but like usually I haven't had very many people except like just a handful, a few policemen come up to me and tell me like, "Put your mask on."
Did
I've
you
only been
do you
called out
guys
by other
have
foreigners.
did you guys have to do vaccine QR codes to get in stuff? Are you still doing that?
They gave us an option to write a name on there and a phone number and stuff. So they didn't force you the QR code system, but they did do a light mandate. They did mandate light, where you can't see a movie or go to a bar or go to get a massage or some other
Is
activities
that still
you
in
can't
effect
do.
now, or has
I
that been
think it
lifted?
is, but I don't think anybody is following it, because I don't know.
They don't ask like if you go to a bar, they usually don't ask. Sometimes they do. And then I don't know, there's ways of getting around it, but I don't know if I should say here.
So are
Well,
you guys? Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say to any Taiwanese people that are listening. Okay, so if the masks do work, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. I mean, I personally don't think they're that effective. In terms of the cost benefit, you're breathing in all these microplastics. Long term use of these things, it might. There's been a lot of studies that have shown the exact opposite of them working. But even if they do work, why are they letting people come into a restaurant? You're in close proximity to people, restaurants and bars and all these things, and you're allowed to take your mask off. But then you go outside and you're supposed to be wearing it, where the UV light is neutralizing any virus that would be in the air, where like you're much farther from people. So the things aren't making logical sense. And so what is this really for? And in my opinion, this is slave training. This is get your population into a submissive mindset, and masks are a great way to do that. And getting people to obey laws that don't make sense is another great way to just induce mass psychosis. So what's next? Are they doing this because they're trying to prepare populations for war, for famine, for whatever next crisis they cook up, another virus? I don't know. But I think people need to be on the lookout here in Taiwan. And if you're listening in China as well, I think it is better to be in Taiwan, where at least you don't have the government coming and knocking, and putting you in a pod somewhere and forcing you to get tested and vaccinated and all this stuff. So it is much better.
Wasn't
to
as
be in
bad as
Taiwan.
Australia or Canada.
Yeah, exactly. I call Canada China now, because, and not in any kind of a racially derogative way, but because it seems like, at least from a lot of Canadians that I've talked to, from their perspective, China is they're now a Chinese style dictatorship.
Do you guys believe that America should be involved with settling this dispute between Taiwan and China, or would it be better for America to say, we've done enough. This is between you two. If they blockade Taiwan, for example, should America do something in retaliation? Or should they say, y'all got to have to figure this out yourself?
I
If you are in danger to answer, you can just put your mask
I'll
on, and
answer.
that'll give us the answer. We need to know. Put your mask
I
on.
I feel like escalating, like the US escalating things will escalate it in a way that it doesn't need to. Like, I don't think they want to fight each other, and um I think that um most Taiwanese I know just want to be peaceful, and I think the blue party wouldn't mind having really good business relations with China, and being able to be friends with them as long as they're able to make more money, um, uh, and have less like restrictions on their business. And I think like many Taiwanese have family in China, and many people in China have family here, and so I don't think they want to fight each other. I think a lot of it is like political posturing, and and I think like the U.S. like trying to make some statement might just escalate things in a way that it didn't have to. But I think maybe they're pretty smart in keeping things maybe low key, and just kind of being like chihuahuas barking at each other. But I don't know, maybe you can say something.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. You know, there's a lot of propaganda that's being pushed in China to kind of corral their own population and give them a sense of victory. So the last time that there was a blockade, China claimed to their own population, at least according to some Chinese speakers who reported this to me, that China was saying that they were shooting down Taiwanese jets during this whole crisis. Hey, yeah, we're winning, which totally didn't happen, at least as far as I know. I mean, maybe it happened, it just got covered up. But I think what's if you want to talk about scapegoats, I know you like to talk about scapegoats, Dave. I think the U.S. is using this to kind of, they're using the China scapegoat to kind of use that as a way to control their population. China's using that too, and Taiwan just happens to be in the middle. And I
So
think
it's your
that if
position.
you,
Yours is a complicated position because you're saying America's government is using China as a scapegoat, but at the same time, China is also actively sabotaging their culture. So that makes it complicated.
yeah,
But
it's like Airstrip 1 is at war against Eurasia now, like or East Asia, and then so, or it might be Eurasia, which would I guess be the Russia conflict. But so I think that the cost of war right now for China would be tremendous. If Taiwan decided to fight back, they could probably sink, I don't know, I guess estimates are between a third and a half of Chinese navy. Like, so if they do have, theoretically, if they do have enough of a landing force, let's say they've got a lot of underground production that we just don't know about, even then it would still be really costly, because Taiwan has this strategy called the porcupine strategy, where they've got weapons all over the place, and they're going to make it extremely costly, even with conventional warfare. And they're capable of, basically everybody who graduates high school here, they have to be trained for at least 4 months in the military if they're an able-bodied person. So there's a lot of people who know how to use guns here, even though gun ownership isn't much of a thing here, which is kind of weird. Since
are they
they're kind
allowed
of
to
under
own
threat.
private guns?
Only the
It's highly
Aboriginals.
restricted.
The Aboriginals can, but usually they keep it at the police station and then borrow it when they go like hunt wild boar or flying squirrels or something. And I saw someone loading like an old fashioned, I don't know what kind of gun. I don't know much about guns, but it was like you have to put a stick down into the barrel to load one single bullet and then aim and fire. So I don't know what kind of gun that would be. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Very, very old fashioned. and they're allowed to like store it at the police station and come get it and then go hunting. But and then if you're not Aboriginal, you can go with your Aboriginal friends into the mountain and join their hunting trip.
Yeah. You just don't want
Occasionally
to
on
do
the
flying fish if you can't do flying fish season if you're a woman. That's the one thing the indigenous won't let you do for some reason. You hear about that?
I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, they have these awesome flying fish on the eastern side of Taiwan, and the natives will go hunt them, but you have to be a dude during a certain time of year to hunt them. Yeah.
Well,
There's
so
there's
you
another
don't
angle
think
I wanted to mention. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
you don't, Justin, you don't think America should be involved with this conflict, or do you think that we should?
That's a tough. Okay, so I
You
want to
just
bring up
don't
this
know.
point.
You can say I don't
think
know.
no. I do
Okay to
know.
say I don't know.
I know what I feel, but I want to bring this up first. So I think that the other angle that I haven't heard anybody talk about this yet is, let's say China and the US sort of want to become more independent of each other. They want to kind of slowly sever those ties, for whatever reason. And the US has, the US has so much production that just got zapped, this last, several decades. It just went over to China and Mexico and a lot of other places. So if the US is looking for an excuse to put more tariffs and possibly embargoes on certain goods and towards China, escalating this crisis in a way that's kind of a controlled fashion would give them the excuse to do that. Okay, so now China's doing this. They just, so if they can push China to do some harsh economic maneuvers, then they can justify, even with the Democrats in power, they can say, hey, look, we need to start cutting back on our Chinese goods, which I think would be kind of a win. Do I think
Why
the
can't
US
the
should
Democrats just do like Trump and said we're going to help the American worker, so we're going to put tariffs on for that? Why they have to, escalate a military brinkmanship to do their sanctions?
Hmm.
You see what I'm asking? Why?
Well, I mean, I think that the U.S. should be. So, if you want to talk about like Ukraine versus Taiwan, I think that it's like it seems more responsible geopolitically for the U.S. to highly arm Taiwan, because Taiwan makes 70%, 65 to 70% of all semiconductors come out of Taiwan, and the highest grade ones, I believe 90% of those come out the 3 nanometer size. So Taiwan is like at the leading edge of like technology production infrastructure. So I
Is
think
that
that
what
it is
Nancy Pelosi went over there because of that semiconductor bill she passed?
probably so. I mean, she probably
She
did.
brought her little son over there, right? As like
But
bring your boy to work day.
but in terms of like, okay, so in the Donbass of Ukraine, those people, I think, more so wanted to actually be part of Russia. And so because Taiwan doesn't want to be part of China, and they are of such strategic value to the whole global supply chain of everything, I think that they should be heavily armed. And I see, I kind of, it's very sad. It's like the U.S. is arming Ukraine, which seems like a hopeless battle. I don't think they're going to beat Russia. I think it's just going to kind of drain a bunch of resources and cut Europe off of the oil supply. But here in Taiwan, if you heavily arm Taiwan to make it impossible you make it too costly for China to consider invading, and then just let them work out their differences slowly over time. And if they want to merge later on, let them, but let it be a choice. If you do that and make an invasion impossible for Taiwan, for China, I feel like there's actually value in that. So I'm in favor of the U.S. arming Taiwan to the teeth, and I wish that Taiwan would take its own defense more seriously, because frankly, the amount that they spend compared to China, and it seems like
So Justin's got a tinge of Dick Cheney in him.
I mean, I don't want war to happen here, but I just
Dude.
think that one of the reasons we haven't had a world war in the last 50 years is because you've got multiple superpowers with nuclear weapons, so you've got mutually assured destruction, so nobody wants to fight each other, which is kind of good in a way.
Does Taiwan have nukes?
So they formally declared that they aren't developing their nuclear program, and they have 4 nuclear plants running. So they are theoretically producing enough uranium that they could produce their own nuclear weapons. The U.S. kind of got involved and told them to stop their nuclear program back in the late 80s, I believe. And so since then, officially, they haven't been pursuing that, and they're apparently being monitored, but maybe they have some nukes, in the basement, and maybe that's the real reason China isn't invading, because they know that China's got something, buried deep in the mountain, but I think ultimately politically China invading, it's just they're going to do such damage to the possibility of having a peaceful reunification within the next, several decades after that. I think that if they can just subvert the government, subvert the media, it's and then
Like if they could just buy out politicians or pay bribes and one by one get them over on their side, I see that more the way they would go, not bombing. That would be too much. That would be too expensive for the infrastructure, like to rebuild everything. Plus, like people would like really hate them,
and they'd get a lot of sanctions, which would cripple their manufacturing and stuff like that.
It would be more difficult to sanction China.
I think they'd probably offer good business deals and try to like maybe bribe politicians or key people that make decisions or something.
Does Taiwan
That's my guess, and I'm not educated about this, so
does Taiwan have a do you think that they have a plan to try to avoid America escalating the conflict between China and them? Do you think that they're trying to manage that relationship too, or are they just kind of beholden to whatever America wants?
They seem pretty beholden at the moment. But yeah.
How about Christianity? How's Christianity in Taiwan? I wanted to ask you that. Is it like a small religion like Japan?
Yeah, I would say maybe like 3%. Yeah. The indigenous people are mostly Christian.
I think the Aboriginals are like 90% or more. Because of Dutch missionaries or Portuguese missionaries, I think. And I don't know the rest of the population. I'm not really sure. Maybe 3 or so. Most people are like Taoist, Confucian. It's like a mix of Taoist, Confucianist, and Buddhist.
Yeah, there's all the churches that I called in Taipei that had an English service, though the pastors had they were not willing to make a stand against the gene jab. So I don't know, like I don't know how serious they are about the gene jab. So I'm not sure how serious they are about their faith, because I think there's some pretty clear warnings in the Revelations, if you take the Bible seriously and stuff. It's like, hey, you can't buy, sell, or trade. Hey, wait, what are they doing with this vaccine? Oh yeah, they're you can't buy, sell, or trade certain things. Oh yeah, the teachers and the nurses, they're getting laid off because they're not, which is selling your labor. So I think that gene jab. Oh, that's the like the COVID vaccine, so-called vaccine. So the churches aren't making much of a stand as far as I know. So I don't know how much genuine Christianity is still here versus how much of it is just, following in the motions and not, but I mean, that's not for me to say. Only God can see their souls. So I hope there's a lot of, fellow believers here. It's interesting to be in such a spiritual country where there's such diverse beliefs happening. It's definitely cool to be immersed in that. The Taoists and the
is Taiwan going to be hit by these fertilizer shortages and the food supply shortages that are and the energy supply shortages that are coming this winter because of the Ukraine conflict and the sanctions and disruptions taking place with European food manufacturing and so forth?
I don't think fertilizer is as big of an issue as oil. So I think if the oil supply chain seems to be okay here, but they have most of their population rides scooters per capita. Like there's so much more scooters over here. So like for me, riding my scooter around, I noticed the price per liter going up, maybe 15%, but I only have to it cost me $7 or $8 instead of, US instead of $6. So it's not really crippling me. Now, if that started to double and triple because of an embargo or a quadruple, they don't have their own, at least as far as I know, they don't have their own domestic supply of oil. So that could be a significant issue if Russia decides to cut off more of that flow and other countries join in. But I think Yeah, I
There's,
think
there's
a lot of those supply
also
chain issues are getting sorted out.
there's Gogoro stations like all over Taiwan, and a lot of people drive
What's that?
the electric. It's an electric scooter, and it's like all over the whole island. There's
What about
stations.
but what about food though? Are they going to have a problem with food and heating and everything? Are they pretty immune from the disruptions from the Ukraine conflict and the European farming
Well,
disruptions?
one
And
thing I'm worried
heat.
about is the electric grid. Do you remember, were you here when the power just shut out?
Yeah.
Um,
Did you feel
and
did you feel claustrophobic when you realized you're on an island and there's no power?
It's a pretty
uh,
big island. Hard
yeah,
to feel
I
claustrophobic
mean,
here.
some neighborhoods had power and some neighborhoods didn't. And the train station, the train just stopped as well because that was, I guess, connected to the grid, the part that shut down, and like that was kind of scary. Like I've heard of Chinese hackers getting into important organizations, and it's just a thought that randomly crossed
Yeah,
my
that's a good
mind.
way they could get Taiwan to come to a screeching halt, is get the power shut down.
Now, some Taiwanese think that those are fake hackers that the Taiwanese government is putting in there so that then they can come back 20 minutes later and say, hey, we fixed the problem. See, like our anti spy agencies are so much better. Then you don't have to worry
Mm,
about it. So some people think it's actually a counterintelligence operation.
interesting.
I think in terms of the food security issue, Taiwan will be immediately affected if they're under a blockade only. We're not getting much of anything from like Eastern Europe. I've only once seen a product coming from like Russia, a few things coming from like Estonia, Lithuania, occasionally like skincare products.
Where do you guys get your
But
food from?
most of it's coming from Australia, New Zealand, some from the Philippines. But I think the domestic production here is pretty solid, at least compared to a lot of other Southeast Asian countries. You've got maybe a 30% overall food deficit, though. So they would be hurting. But I think that because they're so close to their agricultural roots, and because there's so many things that could grow here, within about 6 to 12 months, they'd probably have made up for that 30% food gap. So I don't think you'd have mass starvation or anything here, because you can just throw papaya seeds in the ground, and 6 months later or a year later, you've got a lot of papayas. So I think the government and the way things are so
Yeah,
orderly run here, I think it would be okay. I think oil is
people.
the
Yeah.
big issue, and trade being cut off if that happens.
Yeah, as much as I complain about like um the government just cracking down on stuff, like recently there's been a police guard at the beach like telling surfers they can't surf in the area they've always surfed for the last 7 years, and to go over to another area because I guess 2 months ago a kid drowned in that beach, and so immediately they just cracked down and put that. I noticed some orange cones the same day of, or the day after the drowning, and then they took that down because I mean the orange cones don't do anything, but they've had like volunteer lifeguards and then coast guards there, and they've been anything something happens, they immediately act. I remember maybe 2 years ago we had a giant tower on the beach, 3 stories high, and it fell one time during a typhoon and killed a little boy.
Mm.
And then right away that week and the next week, like all over all the beaches that I went to in Taiwan over the next few months, all the structures, any kind of built bamboo or wooden structure, were all taken down all over the island. So like anytime there's some little thing that happens that has some risk, they jump into action. So I think that would be a good thing, that like they would immediately jump into action and figure out what they can do about it.
Yeah, so that must be why I went to a beach. It was so bizarre. Maybe a few months ago, I went to a beach, and the lifeguards weren't even letting people swim, and it was like this
Yeah,
very like placid beach in North Taipei, or north of Taipei. And I'm just thinking, and they had loudspeakers every like 20 minutes saying, "You cannot swim here. Like, please leave the
uh,
waters."
that's
And,
because
and
a
yet there
kid
was tons of
drowned. A
yeah.
kid
It's just
drowned.
it's just so sad because they need to, like, instead of doing that, they need to have more initiatives for like swim training, because a lot of Taiwanese can't swim, which is bizarre because it's an island. But
is your generation very interested in anime and K-pop and all that stuff and karaoke in Taiwan?
Karaoke, yeah.
Do they do anime there? Do they produce anime and video games like Japan does, or they just import it from Japan?
I don't read Chinese, so I'll have to ask my friends. I know they love.
I guess what I'm asking is, are they a big video game and TV culture, watching anime and sitting around doing nothing, or are they very different from that? Like Japan has a problem with getting young men to get out of their house. They have an epidemic of them not wanting to get married and anything because they watch anime all day. And I was wondering if if that's a plague in Taiwan as well.
Well, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think kids wouldn't be allowed. Most parents wouldn't. Maybe if their parents send them to live with their grandparents, and their grandparents are spoiling them and just buying whatever they want, and then maybe then they would. But I don't think most families would let their kids just like waste their time away. They're in school.
I'm talking about like 20-year-olds too, like 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds.
It's more of an American problem from what I've seen. Taiwanese are workaholics. Like they work.
The Japanese are too, but then they go home and watch anime and they don't start families. They have a problem with that. I'm saying does Taiwan have a similar thing going on?
Birth rate is the lowest in the world, I think, here.
Yeah, so maybe that is true. But I don't know if it's because of video game culture or if it's because of the fact that certain spike proteins are getting plugged up in people's ovaries. I mean, that's a real thing. Look at the stats of it, Dave.
Did it just happen in the last 2 years, or has it always been low?
It's spiked. It spiked recently. Yep.
It got spiked, huh? Goodness.
The birth rate dropping has spiked, or
yes, that's
because of the product or because of the disease.
I mean, isn't it the same thing? I mean, it's kind of like in my opinion, it's a bioweapon, and then it's a bioweapon based off of the active components of that, plus God knows what else is in that thing. I mean, people are saying self-assembling nanobots and all this stuff. I don't know, but at least they know the spike protein is damaging certain organs, and some of those organs that are getting hit are ovaries. So
have you heard anything about magnetic stuff happening with
haven't seen it happen.
I heard someone tell me that one of my friend's uncles had something, and he showed me a picture, but I'm like, yeah, but he could have just been like balancing it on his chest or something. It wasn't necessarily sticking there. Like, I want to go see it in person. That seems too bizarre to me, but I don't know.
Well, it's hard to say. They do know, like I said, that more Taiwanese have died of the injection now than of the virus, and so that's a major problem. And then, but I think okay. So to get back to your anime video game question, it might be a problem. I'll find out for you for next time, but it doesn't seem to be any more of a problem than the U.S. I think honestly, if you want to talk about another issue related to this whole pandemic, the masks, people can't see each other's faces. So if you're trying to like say, I wonder if maybe I'm interested in that girl or that guy, well, you're kind of cut off from people.
You don't know what you're getting until you're inside the building, right?
Well, it's kind of this whole signal of like, I'm behind this wall, and a lot of times, so Taiwan
had a wonderful first date. You could have had a wonderful first date until you get the mask off later on. So, oh my, I didn't know that's what was underneath there, right? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so historically in Taiwan, according to a lot of people that I've talked to, women will wear masks because they don't want to put their makeup on. So they kind of have already been using this as like I'm going to wear this so I don't have to engage with people in society because I don't feel like, flirting or having some guy look at me. So I'm just going to like, okay, on my way to work, just like I'm over here in a corner. So they kind of use it as a way to, I don't know, hide themselves. And so now everybody's wearing it constantly. I think that's playing into. I think you've got a lot of factors. I think health is in decline here. There's a lot more trash, Western style, highly processed foods that are showing up here in the last few years, especially the polyunsaturated fats and stuff like that. So even I came here 4 years ago before, and then I came back, and the quality of food, you do have more organic also being introduced at the same time. but yeah, you've got things like diabetes and cancer are starting to skyrocket like they did in the US, 10, 15 years ago because all these, you know, so-called foods. But here's a cool thing. Look at this. This is banned in the US to sell as a food product. Look at that. You know what that is, Dave. This is apricot kernel. I can buy this off the shelf. Pure organic. I just mix this into my coffee every morning. In the US, I'm not allowed to eat that stuff because the FDA. So that's one of the reasons I like Taiwan.
Apricot kernel?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
There's been studies that have shown a link to this helping out with your body healing itself if it has cancer. So, it's not medical advice or anything, but
what part of the apricot?
The seed, the kernel, and it also has some toxic components as well, which are overemphasized in my opinion. You'd have to eat a ton of them, just like apple seeds. You'd have to eat like 50 apples in a row to like be in serious danger with cyanide poisoning. It's just a small amount, but you've got all these other really, really rare vitamins and minerals that are, in my opinion, outweigh the risk.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've gotten a great snapshot over everything that happens in Taiwan, and I hope that you guys are allowed to wear masks and not have to wear masks soon, and you can get that country in a better direction, and hopefully CCP will find God and turn back to its roots. It's a
Hallelujah.
monotheistic culture, and Taiwan as well, and hopefully that things can start having a renaissance for liberty. And so I appreciate you, Stephen, coming on, and Justin. And if you have any final thoughts, please share them now as we wrap up.
Final thoughts from me. Dave, it's real fun to be on this show. And for those of you who are listening, I've known Dave for a long time, and he's really stood by his principles and really been fighting this fight for a long time. So I appreciate you, Dave. And you're almost like broke into a prayer. So like, I know things are kind of rough for you and your family, and I just want to. Your dad's awesome, Steve. If you're watching, I appreciate what you've done, helping people to experience the love of God. And so God, please bring healing and peace and joy to the Gornoski family. And all my prayers and love go out to your family. So thanks for having me on the show. It's been real fun. And hopefully we can go to that crazy place with the old underground military base, Stephen. It's been fun to meet you virtually over here. I guess we'll have to link up.
Same. Thanks so much for having me on the show as well, and I've really enjoyed following it over the years. And I'm always excited when there's a new episode or new show on. So
now you're in the show.
It's nice to finally be in it. Yeah.
All right. Take care, guys. Thank you.
All right.
Take care.